Good afternoon. Yep, I'm going to go ahead and get started, Isaac, if you're okay with that.
Yep.
My name is Sunny Summers. I'm a senior policy advisor for the Oregon Department of Agriculture, and I'm going to help guide the conversation today. This is the 6th meeting on the LUBGWMA Rules Advisory Committee. We will be adding a 7th meeting later in September, but that meeting, or likely adding another meeting, that meeting has not been scheduled yet. If you want to, if you're not a RAC member and you want to know about that meeting, this is a great plug for me to tell you to sign up for ODA's rulemaking email gov delivery list. You can find that at ODA's rulemaking website, which is either oda.direct/rulemaking, or I put the link in the chat. This meeting is being recorded, and I want to remind folks that only invited RAC members will be speaking today. However, you can send us any comments that you might have to rulemaking@oda.oregon. oda.oregon.gov. Also putting that in the chat. So for those who are not invited RAC members, I'm going to do roll call, and then I will turn it over to, thank you, Isaac, other folks with ODA. A reminder also, please keep your phone muted unless you're called on. That'll help with any background noise. Okay, Greg Harris.
Here.
Thank you. Jeff Svedden.
Here.
Thank you. Am I pronouncing your last name correctly, Jeff?
No, but it's okay.
Okay, maybe we'll have to talk about that sometime. Because that's not how I like to do things. Ascension Ibarra. Okay. Eric Oram.
Here.
Thank you. Carlos Bonilla.
Here.
Thank you. Bob Walder.
Here.
Thank you. Tamara Mabbitt. Oh, she's on another call and will join in a minute. Awesome. Tom Strawn.
Here.
Thank you. Karen Lewatsky.
I'm here.
Thank you. Justin Green.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Jose Garcia.
Jill Service here.
Awesome. Thank you. Cheyenne Holiday.
Here.
Thank you. Caleb Lay. Paul Poister.
Hi, Sunny. I am here.
Okay. Paul, you are really, really quiet.
I'll turn it up. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Brad Spencer.
I am here.
Awesome. Danny Lytle.
Hi, Sunny.
Good afternoon. Mike Hyatt.
Hi, Sunny. This is Justin Sturger. I'm sitting in for Mike Hyatt for DEQ today.
Awesome. Thanks, Justin.
Thank you.
Treya Nance.
Hi, I'm here.
Awesome. Chris Cowitz.
Hi, good morning, Sunny. Or good afternoon, everybody. I should say. This is Tessa Wilburn. I'm filling in for Chris today.
Okay, thank you, Tessa. Isaac, you're here. Kevin, I think I saw you. Perfect. And Renee, I saw you. Okay, again, if you need help muting your phone, I'm happy to do that because I'm getting feedback right now.
I just want to say this time it's not me, Sunny.
No worries, Karen. Okay. With that, I am going to turn it over to Isaac, and Renee. Thank you all.
Yeah, thanks, Sunny, for doing the roll call and getting us all set up. I don't really have any amazing things to say before we jump into it. I think, like Sunny said, we will be setting another meeting for September, which the date will be coming soon. And I think we should just jump right in. So I'll hand it over to Renee to pull up the rules and let's keep chugging along.
Great. Thank you, Isaac. And thank you, RAC, for continuing to be here and engaging in this process. Pulling up the rules. All right. I'm hoping that you can see this. Shall I make it bigger? Thumbs up, thumbs down.
If you can make it a little bit bigger, that would definitely help my eyes.
Okay.
And just real quick, Renee, for folks who may want their own copy, we've posted this on that rulemaking webpage, as well as some feedback from DEQ and OSU that we received since the last meeting. So again, it's in the chat or it's oda.direct/rulemaking. Thank you.
Okay. Is that big enough, folks? Yep. Okay. So these next two sections, the residual soil nitrate level rules. Oh, hi, Danny. Do you want to go ahead?
Hi, yeah, I'm sorry. I was hoping maybe because it looked like there were some relatively substantive changes made to the plan evaluation, section 12 and section 13, if we could go backwards and look at some of those changes.
What do you think, Isaac? Do you think we can manage that, or should we do that at the back end, or?
We could try. I think let's go through these and we can come back to those. That way there might be more discussion there than in maybe some of these, and that way we can make sure we get through the sections we haven't talked about and then we can go back to those.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
as long as we can go back, I'm good with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's no problem with
And-
going back.
And just to let you know, Danny, that section is still under construction, like the Portland airport was for a really long time. There's a lot of dust and noise associated with that section still, so we're still working on it. So it's still a work in progress. So you might see some other. It's going to continue to evolve. So I'm just giving you the heads up that we're still working on that.
Yeah, I completely understand that. But if there's a spot where we can poke at it and offer some constructive feedback, we'd love that opportunity. So
Wonderful, great, thank you. So back to these two sections that we're talking about today: the residual soil nitrate levels and the large irrigated acreage program evaluation. These two rules really go together because both of these rules are geared towards providing information for ODA to be able to gauge the program's effectiveness and determine whether or not the management measures that are in the rules are actually working to reduce soil nitrate in the top 12 or 24 inches of the soil horizon, with the logic being that if we're controlling nitrate at the shallower soil horizons, then we're preventing leaching into the deeper soil horizons and into the groundwater. So that's the basic assumption behind these rules. So ODA is using the residual soil nitrate test as just a mechanism for determining whether soil nitrate concentrations at the deeper soil horizons are going up or down. Now, this is also something that we're continuing to discuss this concept, but for now, these are the draft rules and we can go ahead and go through them so that you get an idea of what we're thinking about as far as being able to find measures for ODA to effectively gauge progress of the program or gauge the effectiveness of the program. This is a really important component the EPA requires in its non-point source programs. And so that's why these two sections are in here. So this first rule talks about residual soil nitrate levels. And this rule would only apply to landowners irrigating large acreages, and that's 1,000 acres or more. And subsection 1 says a landowner subject to these rules shall determine residual soil nitrate levels for each field under their ownership or control using the soil sampling protocol in subsection 2 of this section. And I took the advice from some of the comments from the last RAC and moved subsection 2 out of the soil sampling protocol rule and put it here so that it would make a lot more sense and it wouldn't be so confusing. So thank you for those comments. A says that initial residual soil nitrate samples shall be taken in the spring prior to planting, and thereafter residual soil nitrate samples shall be taken in the fall post-harvest once every 5 years. So the reason for this is that we want the first sample to be taken preferably when a grower is taking their pre-planting soil tests, and they would take this residual soil nitrate test at the same time for the first year at the deeper soil horizon, as well as taking the pre-planting soil samples to determine how much fertilizer they need to put down. And then thereafter, a grower would not have to take these residual soil nitrate samples except for in the fall, post-harvest once every 5 years after that initial soil sample. Subsection 2, this is the methodology for taking, oh, yes, Danny.
I'll turn on my screen so you can see me. I'm a little bit puzzled why ODA would think that it's appropriate to take a soil nitrate sample in the spring and compare it to a fall soil sample 5 years later. We know that there's a lot of variation temporally throughout the year, spring versus fall. Your soil temperatures are different, which are going to be impacting your nitrification rates. And I'm wondering why that seems like it's an appropriate basis for program evaluation in your eyes.
So I'm trying to remember the thought behind that. I think, and I'm not discounting your comment at all. It makes sense to me, but I think where it came from originally was from some literature from California. But I can go back and take a look at that and maybe talk with the soil scientists that I've been talking with and see what they think about that, changing that to a post-harvest fall sample for the first residual soil nitrate.
I think another component, if I'm trying to stretch my brain back to when we initially drafted, was that we anticipated these rules to be put in place in the beginning of this next year in 26. And so it made sense to have an initial soil sample taken at the start of the program. And since that was going to be essentially in the spring, that's kind of how we're thinking about it initially, and then have them follow up in the fall moving forward. But yeah, I mean, your point is well taken. There is, right, all of what you said, we 100% agree with. So yeah, open
there's also
to shifting. We just want to make sure we get like an initial baseline soil sample. And so that's, I believe, why we said it that way too.
Yeah, there's a it was done in the LUBGWMA. It was a deep soil survey that they did, and they did deep soil nitrate sampling in the spring and the fall, I believe around 2014, 2015. And they showed very clearly that there are differences in the nitrate that you're going to see in spring versus fall. And so I have many problems with this section, but at the very least, that is an easier fix, would be to at least align your sampling times.
Yeah, no, thanks for that feedback.
Okay, thank you. Subsection 2, to determine soil nitrate residues, a landowner shall collect separate composite soil samples after harvest of annual crops and before 1.5 inches of rainfall accumulates and before any post-harvest irrigation. October 1st shall be the start date for tallying the accumulation of rainfall. Separate composite soil samples shall be collected at 36 to 48 inch depth below the crop root zone, according to guidance contained in EM 8832E and EM 9221 for post-harvest nitrate nitrogen. And is that Greg?
Yep.
Yes, questions on this. So we changed, I mean, earlier this was 3 inches in September 1. In some ways actually makes more sense than this, but I'm our even the DQ permits, non-growing season starts October 31st, or November 1. For accumulation of rainfall, I've mentioned this before. I mean, we still have crops growing in October. So we have corn silage that can grow through most of the month of October till it freezes. Alfalfa is still growing. We're still doing harvests. So it's tough to get a post-harvest sample if we haven't harvested,
Okay.
which happens after October 1 with most of our crops, even potatoes. So I mean, if anything, I would suggest moving that to November 1 as opposed to October 1, because then at least most of our crops are harvested and we can get in there. And then the post-harvest, before any post-harvest irrigation, I think there needs to be some leeway in there, because like with corn, for instance, we purposely dry down the profile, especially if it's grain corn. Dry down the profile to the point where, to pull a soil sample that deep would be hard without any moisture. And or it'd be powder. You may not get a very good soil sample. So, something to consider if your soil is down to 50% field capacity, especially down to 3 feet or something. I mean, you may have to put a little bit of moisture on just to get a soil sample.
Thanks, Greg. Jeff?
Yeah, I was just following up with Greg. Like wheat is the worst. You have to wet it up to pull a soil sample with wheat. Because if it's so dry, I mean, everyone knows these soils are sandy. Even if you try to hand auger it, it just will fall out. The sand will just fall out of your auger. And you guys asked for fiscal impact. Just this section 15, every time we pull a soil sample, the way the rules are written right now, you have to pull from every field. So we're looking at $40,000 every time we do this. So by the time we pull our second set of 5-foot samples, we're at 80,000. If we cannot wet up the profile, we are then buying a hydraulic probe. That's another 40,000. So we're 120,000 in. So, yeah, anyways, that's just information for you guys, because you guys asked for it last meeting.
Yeah, thanks for that. One of the reasons that we put that in there was from the concerns we heard around, not wanting to incentivize folks to irrigate to push nitrates through the profile so that they artificially lower in their soil samples. So we were trying to like balance that in terms of the language around like, well, don't irrigate because you don't want to push that through the profile out of the root zone or any deeper. So that, I mean, that's the thought process behind it. And Renee, feel free to correct me or add to that, but that's one of the things we were trying to address. Yeah, Greg.
So I mean, I get that. I've heard that same comment before, but to go out and put, 2.5, 3 inches of water on, like after a wheat field, to actually, well, take more than that to actually push it out of the 5th foot. I mean, that's $25 to $30 an acre.
Yeah.
Why am I going to go spend that on water or more to push nitrogen out of the soil?
Thanks. Brad put in the chat 60 to 72 is a 6-foot sample. Do you intend to specify a 5-foot sample?
Did I still get that wrong? I'll have to go back and check that. I thought I responded to your comment from last session about the 72 to 84. So I'm sorry, I can't see my comment. Can you guys see the comment?
Yeah, it's so 60 would be 60 inches is 5 foot.
Okay.
A 48
70
to 60 would be a 5-foot cord.
Okay.
versus 5 to 6 foot, which is what the 60 to 72.
Correct. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
And then just a comment, the 1.5 inches of rainfall that came from the precipitation data for Umatilla County. And I think I put it in my comment, like where I got that number from. Okay, are we ready to move to C? Soil samples shall be processed at a laboratory accredited by the North American Proficiency Testing, NAPT. Subsection 3, a landowner shall record residual soil nitrate levels for each field under their ownership or control on a worksheet supplied by the department and shall submit completed worksheets to the department by December 30th of each reporting year. A, notwithstanding who the operator is, a landowner shall assure that residual soil nitrate samples are taken, recorded, and sample results submitted consistent with this rule. And then this has been deleted. Yes, Jeff.
I just have a question. If anyone has been consulting with the local labs to see if they could shoulder the burden of running this many samples, additional samples, before that deadline, December 30th. Because this could again, if you're sampling every single field in the LUBGWMA under over 1,000 acres, that could be, and they're 5-foot samples, that could inundate labs pretty quickly. So, I guess I'm wondering if you guys have done any consulting with the local labs to see if they could supply that throughput.
Not
Or
at this point.
support it, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah, not at this point. Thanks, Jeff, for that.
Greg and then Danny.
I was just kind of tagging on what Jeff said. That's actually a great point because we have troubles ourselves getting all of our samples ran right now for our CAFO. In that time frame, with the number of samples that we take, we've actually had to split up. 2 years ago, we actually had to split up amongst labs just with ours. So that could be a very good challenge, or very well challenged. So
Thank you, Greg. Danny.
Sorry, there we go. I was curious, and I actually don't know the answer to this, but I'm guessing the assumption is that if you have 1.5 inches of rain, that you're going to be leaching from the 4th foot to the 5th foot. And I'm wondering if the soil holding capacity actually supports that. Taking that deeper sample after only 1.5 inches.
I think it really depends on the soil type. I think that the rules are written with the fact that, with the understanding that the predominant soil type seems to be sandy loamy soil.
So then is ODA going to be comparing some samples taken at the 4th foot and some samples taken at the 5th foot all mixed together for this program efficacy?
No, I think they would be separate. The point of the exercise is to determine whether soil nitrate levels are increasing or decreasing over time at the deeper soil horizons. with the assumption being that if nitrogen is not, well managed at the top soil horizons where the crop, within the crop root zone, that if there's excess nitrate leaching down below the crop root zone, it's going to end up in the deeper soil horizons. So that a deeper residual soil nitrate test would provide information to the department as to whether or not there's more nitrate present in the deeper soil horizons than not. Keep in mind that, ODA is going to be starting to collect data through this program. So there's not going to be anything conclusive right away. And we don't have any existing data to pull from. And so the point of this is to start creating a database to see if we can track the efficacy of the program through these numbers.
I guess I'm a little concerned on this. Now we have some samples coming in at 4 feet and some samples coming in at 5 feet. And I'm not 100% sure, and I can go and look up some of the soil data, but I'm not 100% sure that 1.5 inches of rain is going to move anything from the 4th foot to the 5th foot.
Okay. And the other thing I'd like to put out there for you guys to think about is like, we really have been struggling with how to figure out whether or not the program is working. And one way would be to ask everyone to install section lysimeters at the perimeters at the, down gradient portions of their fields. But that seems really expensive. And so we're not, we're mindful of economic constraints and trying to create a program that's not going to be too fiscally onerous on landowners, and yet yield information that's going to be helpful to the agency to figure out how the program is working. So just keep in mind that we know that a lot of these methodologies are not perfect, and that there are better technologies or methodologies that may be more suited to getting more accurate data. But, as a policy matter, we were really concerned about the cost of implementing those other, measures. So we understand that this is a compromise as far as some of the data points that you're talking about, but we really don't want to impose any, fiscal burden on the growers if we can find a cheaper way to do it.
Jeff?
So, as we've discussed this, I thought all the data was going to be stored in-house at the landowner's operation. Is this section an exclusion to that? Or is ODA? So ODA will be collecting this and building a data set that they can then use to evaluate the program. Is that the right way to understand that?
Yeah, if you'll see subsection 3 says that the results are put on a worksheet and then submitted to ODA by December 30th of the reporting year. So once every 5 years.
Yeah, so there's two things that are submitted to the agency. One is the certification of the plan, and then this soil sample data.
So it's anticipated that when you submit like your plan, or well, I guess that you'd submit them separately, right? Because your plan's due in May.
So you don't submit the whole plan or your end of year analysis. Those are records that you keep on farm.
Yeah.
The only thing so
all you're doing with the plan is submitting that you have a plan and it's been certified, right?
Right.
And then then once every 5 years you're submitting this information, right?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Sorry. No, that's fine.
I was just going to say, so you'd have the initial deep soil sample that you take, and then again once every 5 years after that. So
yeah. I just was going to follow up with again, I think sampling a subset of fields addresses a lot of the fiscal concerns you guys have. And again, I've thrown 10% out. I think that's a good number. But yeah, for our fiscal costs with this, it would go down substantially if we did not have to sample every single field. So, and I think that would help with some of the lab constraints and concerns that were brought up by Greg and I. If they're getting 10% of a management unit instead of 100%, that, yeah, you know, the numbers just go way down. So that's my comment.
Thanks, Jeff. Greg?
So just for clarity, so that the samples at the end of the 5-year period that are submitted will be subject to public records request.
So,
So every landowner is going to have data that's available to the public submitted to the ODA.
yeah, and I
Yep.
think, you know, there are ways to address concerns around confidentiality. So we understand the concern. But yes, basically these would be public records. Now, whether or not they're going to be subject to disclosure in every case, I couldn't really tell you at this point.
Danny?
So you said kind of at the beginning of this section that EPA is requiring these metrics to, and correct me, I wasn't able to write fast enough. I have EPA requires metrics for the non-point source pollution program. Did I get that right?
So EPA basically requires about 5 elements of a non-point source pollution program. And one of the elements is whether or not there is a mechanism for evaluating the efficacy of your program. And so they aren't prescribing a certain methodology for doing that. They're just saying that the agency has to have some mechanism for evaluating effectiveness.
So I'm curious because to my knowledge, no other irrigated ag nitrate management program is relying on residual soil nitrate as their metric. What are these other programs doing that ODA has decided is inappropriate to use as their metric?
Well, as I mentioned before, we've heard that there are other mechanisms that would provide greater clarity about the data. But as I just discussed, some of these other methodologies are really expensive and involve, taking either drilling monitoring wells up and down gradient of a piece of land, or putting in some kind of lysimeters, or some way of tracking the groundwater directly. So that would be probably a more accurate mechanism, I think. However, it seems cost prohibitive. But
I know that California, for example, is not requiring lysimeters. And to my knowledge, for example, Nebraska or Minnesota are also not requiring this.
Well, we're not requiring lysimeters either.
But they're also not requiring, sorry, I meant the deep soil residual samples.
Well, I think, if you want to provide these other examples from these other programs that you want us to take a look at, we'd be willing to take a look at them.
Renee, was it what state? Because we did look at one state that is requiring deep soil that's using that as a metric. Which state was that? Can you remind me?
It was the great state of Canada. No, I'm kidding.
No, well, it was Canada, but there was also another state.
There was
it Wisconsin?
There were some in Wisconsin. There was a paper about it.
Would you be able to share that out?
I think it has been. It might be. I can't remember if we posted an updated reference list, but if next time we post our updated reference list, it's in there.
Okay. Thank you.
Are we ready to move on? So 16 is the large irrigated acreage program evaluation. Subsection 1, the department shall conduct an evaluation of agricultural operations with large irrigated acreage areas to determine whether and to what extent the nitrogen management measures and annual nitrogen budget plans have been implemented and adaptive management measures adopted. A, the department shall not conduct an evaluation under this subsection for at least 3 growing seasons subsequent to the effective date of these rules. The department's evaluation shall include an audit to determine the percentage of landowners who have submitted proof of certifications for annual nitrogen plans and the percentage of total landowners who have submitted residual soil nitrate sample results. Upon inspection of documents for which proof of certification shall be submitted, and upon inspection of the agricultural operation. The department's evaluation shall include a determination of the trends of residual soil nitrate levels. So this is where that residual soil nitrate level piece fits in, is that the department will look at the trends, but like I said, we would be gathering data, so it's not clear how conclusive the trends will be. But I think the policy point is that we need to start somewhere and start getting some information in addition to evaluating the program using these other mechanisms.
Jeff and then Greg.
So these last 2 sections, it seems like it only applies to irrigated large acres. This seems like a way that you're trying to evaluate the whole of LUBGWMA. Why are only large irrigators subject to this? Why? Because I mean, there's a significant portion of the LUBGWMA that are small operators that you would be missing. I think potentially large source of nitrate getting into the groundwater.
Well, that's an important point, and I think we'd like to think about it. Thank you. As you may recall, the application rates and restrictions that apply to everyone do require that all landowners keep track of the fertilizer that they put down and keep application records, which are subject to inspection. So conceivably, the agency could be looking at some of that information as well in the program evaluation, but it's not clear from this rule, as you point out. So I'd like to think about that. Thank you.
Well, yeah, so I just, in response to your comment, number 2 in section 16 says the department's evaluation shall include a determination of the trends of residual soil nitrate levels. I mean, that's only going to be looking at a select number of individuals in that unit. I just feel like that could potentially be a very biased data point because you are not monitoring or not requiring all growers to do that. So
Jeff, are you advocating for all growers to do those 5-year samples? Is that what I should take from that,
or adjusting your 1,000 acres? Everyone with a 5-acre field, maybe not, because I don't know, but I just feel like, again, I don't think you guys told us how many people you think will be subject to these rules.
We don't actually know.
We don't, yeah. So
right, because we've heard the comment a few times, like, oh, maybe we should lower that number of acres for inclusion into like the large size, and we're open to suggestions of what to lower that to. The part of the way we got to the number we got is we looked at USDA county level census data for farms of a certain size, 1,000 acres or more, and then farms with irrigation, and tried to like look at, okay, what does that look like in terms of number of growers? Does it give us a good sense? We do not have data going down to the LUBGWMA size, obviously, within like that area. So it's a bit of an educated stab in the dark with setting it at 1,000 acres or more. But we have said we're open to other suggestions. We just, what are folks thinking?
I think 1,000 is big. I don't know how many people you're capturing with that. Again, I thought you guys would know more than I do, but apparently we're both in the dark.
Yeah, unfortunately, because again, like the agency's never had, like, no grower has to register with us and how many acres they grow. We don't have that data like on an individual level or grower across the state. So we have to look to USDA census data, which is then obviously done at the county-wide level. So it's hard for us to kind of drill down any deeper.
Yeah, I look at like subsection B where you're auditing how many people are submitting proof of certification and who are having plans, and they're actually looking at them as a much better indicator of your gains than I think soil nitrogen levels at 5-foot depths with no other context. And from I think a subset of the community that might not be very representative. Yeah, I don't know. I just bullet number 2 in section 6 is, I don't know how useful it would be personally.
Thanks, Jeff. Greg?
Just, sorry for the question, a little more clarification on, so what actually gets turned in to this, to the state once every 5 years. So the residual soil nitrate samples taken, whether it's depending on the depth, whether you get 1.5 inches or not. I still think that should be November 1, October 1. 1.5 inches of soil moisture or not, so either the 5th foot potentially or less. And so what gets the optics, what gets turned into the state is a 5-year trend. So it's a sample taken after 5 years with no regard for what's happening in between. I mean, that number could go up and could go down.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a public record. We know, I mean, the environment we're in right now, there's already lawsuits in place. My fear is people are, I mean, that's a snapshot in the dark of 1 year, one soil sample, and that could have multiple trends during that 5 years. How do we keep somebody from just taking that data and looking at it and saying trends are up when in fact it may have been down for 4 years, and for 4 years of that 5, or even 3 of that 5, depending on the crops, whether it's alfalfa, deep rooted, shallow rooted, etc. How do we anticipate pushing back on that? Because I could very easily see it happening.
Well, I think it's always hard to keep people from taking information out of context and using it to their advantage. So I think that's kind of a facet that is not one that we can necessarily control. We do understand the concern about public documents being subject to disclosure, which is why we've fashioned the majority of the rules so that the landowners keep their documents for their use. I mean, the focus on this is for growers to be using assessment tools that help them manage nitrogen better. Given that, the department still has to figure out some way to evaluate the program. And right now, we've got a couple of really difficult options. Either we figure out how to get the groundwater tested, and the concern that we have about that is that even if you pull a high, a hot groundwater sample, you can't really tell whose fault it is that that there's a high level of nitrate in that groundwater sample. There could be several sources. It's hard to pin down the sources. So that was a real constraint that we considered when we were thinking about whether or not monitoring wells were the appropriate way to go, as opposed to trying to find another methodology that would be more site specific. And so, like I said, nothing is perfect, but this seemed like a better methodology than requiring monitoring wells. And that information would also be public information. So
I think so, right? Like the 1 year does not make a trend. It's going to take a while, given that these are samples once every 5 years, to actually be able to do a trend. So, I mean, I guess like there's going to be several years or several cycles of the 5 year samples before the agency's really able to look at those deep soil samples and say, okay, is this going up or down in terms of a overall trend?
and keep in mind, this is just for the department to track how well its program is doing. It's not a regulatory point.
I
Danny?
understand it's not a regulatory point, but it can still be used for, it's still subject to, FOIA, public records laws. So if maybe there's a way we can do this without, or submitting that, or during the audit, if there's, so many audits that are taken, just so, I don't know, I would ask, we think about some way so that all these soil samples aren't turned in, that are open to, public records laws. So, I mean, we turn a lot in, obviously our CAFA, so I understand what that's like, and we get FOIA requests a lot. And I would just don't want every other landowner that's 1,000 acres above to have to go through what we go through.
Thank you, Greg. Danny?
I wanted to double back on what you said, Isaac, where ODA doesn't really have a sense of how many landowners will be impacted by the 1,000-acre rule. And so then I'm wondering how you intend to evaluate the percentage of landowners that have submitted proof of certification if you don't know how many landowners there are.
So partly that'll be an evaluate, like how many people do we have that have submitted, and then the rest, like identifying folks who aren't or haven't submitted. That's going to have to be on like a case by case basis with the compliance staff in the region. So if somebody says, "Hey, Danny's farming 1,000 acres or more," and has a concern about it, then that would be something we could follow up on. But yeah, point taken. It's going to be the honor system, and then us verifying or getting reports of somebody that needs to be part of the program that may not be.
Karen?
Yeah, I have to agree with Jeff and then also with Jose. I feel like, and it's maybe come up a few times in the RAC discussion so far, I feel like we do need to look at the smaller acreages, particularly if we're trying to assess the success or failure of the program we're trying to create in gathering the information and assisting the growers in the way that we're envisioning as we're talking about it here. I don't think just looking at information from the 1,000 acres and more or managing to that is going to be very effective. So I just wanted to say that. And then I also want to support what Greg and others have brought forward about being concerned about some of the information. If you're an agronomist or you're a science person or if you're a farmer or if you work at ODA, you know that one reading does not a trend make. If you work in the media or other places, you may well not know that. And that can look like a very damning statement. And so I'm sympathetic to that concern, and I don't know how we address it. But I do think it's something that needs to be taken seriously and dealt with thoughtfully. Thanks. That's kind of random comments.
Thanks, Karen. Justin Green?
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for this good back and forth. But yeah, I just wanted to echo the comments about just being deliberate about what data is being collected, submitted, and is available. We absolutely agree. We can't control how it's interpreted, but we also don't have to collect data that we know can be misleading or complex to understand to the layperson. And then also just, once again, just reiterating my comments, and I'll put this in a comment letter as well. Just this is a new approach in Oregon with this rulemaking, and we're looking at other states, but this can be an iterative and adaptive management process where the rules evolve based on how the audits and the strategic implementation area process, how that unfolds. Will be a lot of lessons learned there. So my comment is just kind of less is more. There's the more specifics, the more unintended consequences. And I know I've said that before, but I appreciate this back and forth. This is detailed stuff, and a lot of folks have done their research on this, so I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks, Justin. And just for those who may not be looking at the chat, Jose had said he agreed with Jeff. We should look at not only farms with 1,000 acres or less, or more, but less as well. 100 acres is a lot. One person can have 200 cows in one lot. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, I just like to echo, I get apprehensive knowing some of this data will be made public record without any context around any of it, especially with just single data points. If the agency thinks that this is an absolute must, can you build in some kind of mechanism to where it's not released until you know you have a trend?
Thanks, Jeff.
If that's something that the agency's like, no, we're going to do this no matter what, can we, I mean, as you're writing the rules, can you build in, we're not going to release this until we have like 4 cycles or 5 cycles?
I think that we couldn't write a rule that that conflicted with the Oregon public records law.
Okay.
But we could craft it, Renee, don't you think, in a way that says we won't do a trend analysis until we have X number of data points.
Yeah,
Right.
that
Like
we could do.
that we could do, which would put it out. That's not going to exempt them from public record requests, though, if that makes sense. It just means that we wouldn't do a report on a trend until we had a sufficient amount of data, as you suggest, Jeff.
Yeah, and I mean, I agree with the previous comment, Justin. I believe less is more, but if the agency is like, we have to do this, I would feel much more comfortable knowing that whatever that analysis is going to be after there's, I believe, sufficient data to say anything.
And then kind of along those lines, Karen's asking in the chat if there's some mechanism for the adjustment of the program as we move forward.
And by that, I'm just trying to address the idea of adaptive management. We keep stressing the fact that this is a new program. We're not sure. Mm-hmm. We don't have this number. We don't have that number. I'd like to make sure that somehow it's explicit that we expect to, over time, revisit this and fine tune it in light of those numbers or those trends or any experience that we have implementing the program moving forward. I think that's really important.
Thanks, Karen. Anyone else before we move on? Awesome. Back to you, Renee, when you're done writing notes.
Okay. All right. This next section has to do with a voluntary program. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with ODA stewardship agreements, but it's akin to a stewardship agreement, but it's a water quality certification program and agreement, and it's a voluntary program for landowners conducting agricultural activities within the LUBGWMA. And through this program, a landowner who has entered into an agricultural water quality certification agreement with the department may receive regulatory certainty. The department shall, during the term of the certification agreement, consider a landowner as in compliance for purposes of enforcement with ORS 468B025 and ORS 568-930 sub 1 and any of the department's rules implementing those statutes. And a landowner may also receive recognition that the certified landowner's agricultural practices are protective of water quality, and a landowner may receive priority access to specially designated technical and financial assistance to implement practices that promote groundwater quality as that assistance is available. So this is kind of like a gold star program for folks who are really performing above and beyond. They can enter into these agreements to achieve regulatory certainty and recognition. Qualifying landowners may apply for certification on an Oregon Agricultural Water Quality Certification Program form supplied by the department. Application elements shall include a statement from the landowner agreeing to produce any documents requested for inspection by the department during the term of the agricultural water quality certification agreement, a statement from the landowner agreeing to submit to the department post-harvest soil sample results each year for each field, a statement from the landowner agreeing to submit to the department residual soil nitrate samples, and a statement from the landowner agreeing that the department may use the data collected during the landowner's participation in the program to support the program. 3, the department may enter into an agricultural water quality certification agreement with a landowner if the application is complete, the department has, after inspection, determined that the landowner is in full compliance with the rules in this division, and the landowner agrees to the terms of the agreement. 4, an agricultural water quality certification agreement shall, among other terms, contain terms specifying that the landowner's duties include the duty to A, maintain compliance with all applicable water quality rules in place at the time of certification, and to notify the department within 30 days of a violation of applicable water quality rules. B, continue to implement the annual nitrogen plan, soil sampling as appropriate to implement the annual nitrogen plan and post-harvest and residual soil nitrate sampling regimes. C, inform the department upon the sale of any land subject to the certification agreement, or inform the department upon purchase or lease of any additional agricultural land after the start of the certification agreement. D, retain all records pertinent to the certification agreement and make them available to the department upon request. E, allow entry by the department at agreed upon dates and times to lands subject to the certification agreement for the purpose of the department's inspection for compliance with the terms of the agreement. And F, inform the department if landowner is unable to comply with the terms of the certification agreement due to circumstances the landowner believes are beyond the landowner's control. 5, an agricultural water quality certification agreement shall, among other terms, contain terms specifying that the department, A, may conduct periodic audits with the landowner on land subject to the certification agreement. An audit means a review of land management practices on land subject to the certification agreement and a review of documents necessary to determine compliance with the certification agreement's terms. B, shall notify landowner if documents or data retained by the department pursuant to certification agreement are requested for disclosure under the Oregon Public Records Act. C, may recognize that all documents submitted to the department as part of the landowner's certification agreement are exempt from disclosure, provided that the documents are confidential submissions as provided in ORS 192-355-4, exempt as provided under 192-355-9A, our trade secrets is provided in 192-345-2 or otherwise determined as lawfully exempt from disclosure. D, may terminate the certification agreement upon a final determination that the landowner has violated any state water quality law and rule in effect during the period of certification agreement. E, may terminate the certification agreement if the department finds the landowner is no longer complying with any term of the certification agreement. So that's the program. This was adopted or we used Minnesota's voluntary program as a model for developing these draft components of a certification agreement program. Shall I move on? Okay, section 18 is specific action requirements. Other provisions in Oregon's ODA's non-point source program also has this. This language was taken from another rule, OAR 603-090040. And what specific action requirements are is that a landowner subject to the rules in this chapter may be required to undertake additional site-specific practices designed to prevent agricultural waste from entering the groundwater of the state. if after inspection of an agricultural operation, the department determines that a landowner is in compliance with the rules of this chapter, but there still exists the potential for agricultural waste to enter the groundwater of the state. There's a little typo there. And a landowner may appeal a specific action requirement under this rule. So this would just happen. This is would be additional actions that the ODA would require a landowner to take if they weren't currently violating a rule, but there was a strong likelihood that a continuing management practice would lead to a violation. These are individual orders that are issued to the landowner, and they're subject to appeal by the landowner. And this next section is complaints and investigations. And this language is taken from 603-095-0380. So this is a language that's existing in other parts of ODA's non-point source program, and I didn't change any of the language there for consistency's sake. And so subsection 1 says, when the department receives notice of an alleged occurrence of agricultural pollution through a written complaint, its own observation, through notification by another agency or by other means, the department may conduct an investigation. The department may, in its discretion, coordinate inspection activities with the appropriate local management agency. 2, each notice of an alleged occurrence of agricultural pollution shall be evaluated in accordance with the criteria in ORS 568-900 to 933 and any rules adopted thereunder to determine whether an investigation is warranted. Any person allegedly being damaged or otherwise adversely affected by agricultural pollution or alleging any violation of ORS 468B025, ORS 568-900 to 933, or any rules adopted thereunder may file a complaint with the department. 4, the department will evaluate or investigate a complaint filed by a person under OAR 603-095-0380 subsection 3 if the complaint is in writing, signed and dated by the complainant, and indicates the location and description of A, the waters of the state allegedly being damaged or impacted, and B, the property allegedly being managed under conditions violating 468B025, ORS 568-900 to 933, or any of the rules adopted thereunder. 5, as used in subsection 4 of the section, person does not include any local, state, or federal agency. 6, if the department determines that a violation of 468B025, ORS 568-900 through 933, or any rules adopted thereunder has occurred, the department may proceed with the enforcement procedures in OAR 693-090-60 through 603-090-0120. And with
Renee?
that, yes.
I'm just going to jump in. Jose had to leave, but he said he
okay.
likes the regulatory certainty and thinks it's really good for adapting to future changes and predict how rules can change. We want to give farm a way of having confidence. I just wanted to make sure you saw that in the chat. And then Jeff, please go ahead.
Renee, if you had some things to say, I can wait until afterwards. It sounded like you were going to finish up.
I was going to say, congratulations, RAC. We made it through the rules. That's all I was going to say.
Awesome. Well, thank you. So I'm not going to pretend to be a lawyer, but I have a question for you. The way the rules seem to be written in section 12, you guys made the change. A landowner has met or followed their annual nitrogen plan if for each field post-harvest soil nitrate levels in the crop zone are low or showing a trend of decreasing. So my question is, with the way that you guys written all the compliance and everything else like that, if we have, and the way that it's written right now, we're sampling every single field. If you had one field in all the fields that we have that is increasing, since we sampled at the beginning of the season, it seems like the way the rules are technically, like we're out of compliance. So my first question is, based on all of the stuff at the end, what does that mean that we're out of compliance? My second question is a landowner liable for that because we're technically out of compliance? And if that is true, the last thing I want to do is pull soil samples to evaluate my nitrogen program.
So
So
I think,
that's a big
Good
question, but you read a
Okay.
lot of lawyer stuff to me, so I'll respond with a big question.
okay, I'll see if I could, I just want to make sure I understood your question. So forgive me if I'm repeating it back to you, so you can correct me if I'm misunderstanding. But I think I heard you say, if you have a field that where you didn't follow your annual nitrogen budget, are you out of compliance? Was that your first question?
Yeah, and that's based on section 12, bullet 3. And that
No,
seems to be how that's stated.
no, you're not out of, if, for example, you come back, and you didn't meet your annual nitrogen plan for any of your fields, that does not mean that the Oregon Department of Agriculture is going to come out and ding you and write you up. What that means is that you need to take a look at your management practices and then go to this chart here for your adaptive management measures and see if you can improve your nitrogen management measures. And so you would implement your adaptive management measures in the second year's budget. So you would try to add these measures into next year's budget on how to, manage your nitrogen, and you would see how you did the following year. So the program is supposed to be an assessment tool. So you see, I didn't meet my plan. I documented why. Here's some adaptive management measures I'm going to try, and let's see if it works out better next year. But that's not a compliance point for ODA. The only compliance point is whether or not you submitted your proof of certification. So all ODA wants to know is whether you went through the assessment plan, you got your plan certified by an agronomist, and you're going through the exercise. They're not looking at the substance of how you did. Does that help answer your question?
It does. It leads to another question, but maybe you want to answer my other ones first. But well, let me find where it's at. And
So
I
you're
think
talking about 12, is that right? 12?
Well, we're going to jump up to something else. It states in section 5 that you are not allowed to apply nitrogen more than 30 days before planting. So if you applied 32 days before planting, are you out of compliance?
So that you're referring to subsection 5. Should I scroll up there?
5E.
Okay. Hang on. Whoops, too far.
Or maybe, is it E?
5.
And I bring this up at the end because these are compliance questions.
Sure.
That's where I felt like they fit.
Okay, so yes, if you apply fertilizer to frozen fields or snow-covered fields or saturated fields, or to bare fields, if you're not going to be planting within 30 days, yes, that is a compliance point.
So what is the liability around that?
So Kevin can speak to that a little bit better than I can. He's in the compliance, he heads up the compliance piece of the non-point source program, but generally I think there's like a water quality warning. Like there's a process where ODA comes out and investigates, and if they see a problem, they issue a warning and they come back out to see how you're doing on correcting the situation they saw. And if you've corrected it, I think that's the end of the matter. But if you haven't, then I think they can move on to more formal enforcement.
Okay. I brought up this bullet point for a reason. We currently, with our current tractor and machinery load, we cannot do that in 30 days. To be able to do that in 30 days, you have to buy another tractor, you have to buy another spreader, you probably have to buy more tillage implement. That's over $1 million.
Okay, wait,
So-
so you have to buy special equipment for that?
You just have to buy more. And you won't be able to go to custom guys because everyone is going to be required to do that. And everyone plants their potatoes at the same time. Everyone plants their onions at the same time. Everyone plants their corn at the same time. And so the burden will be on us doing that. And so we will have to buy that equipment. At a minimum, that's another tractor for us. That's an easy $800,000. That's another spreader. That's 500,000 or more. That's more tillage, which is 100,000. So we're over $1 million to just meet that. The other part is if you're going to apply compost, you say if you're gonna, everyone applies compost like starting right now. And then, but you're saying if you want to apply compost in the fall, you have to plant a cover crop. But if you want to apply compost in front of your potatoes, sure, apply compost in August, plant your cover crop in August, but then you fumigate in October and you kill your cover crop. So that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. So I think I think it's all pretty much resolved. If we need about 8 weeks to be able to spread everything, and that's closer to 60, around 60 days. That 30-day window is very, very tight. And to be
Okay.
able to do that is going to be, machinery is just expensive. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Greg?
Yeah, it's a little bit of what Jeff said. Also on the since we're there on the compliance piece, the 30-day component, agree 100% with what Jeff said. I also went back, through the comments. There was did not find a conflict with NOP standards. So dried manure. Like I'm harvesting a field of potatoes right now that we would be in conflict. We could not harvest those fields right now. So there absolutely is a conflict with NOP standards. Vegetables that are in the soil are 120 days pre-harvest. Those potatoes, many vegetable crops are 75 days or less. The potatoes we're harvesting right now are 75 days from planting to harvest. So we would be in conflict with the National Organic Program by sticking to a 30-day harvest window on like a dried manure that's not considered a full compost or effluent or something along those lines. So, and even if you want to, you could even reference like EM 9221, whichever that reference, the publication we're looking at. It even talks about one is plant available nitrogen, which we need to make sure that we're looking at that when we're looking at applications. But it also even recommends, how application of organic nitrogen and that testing is the risk of leaching is extremely low. So,
Would the 60 days work for you in the scenario you just outlined?
So May, I don't think so. I think we're closer to, because the other issue with dried manures, compost, those kind of things, even with cover crops, is you're driving across the fields. It's it's almost a crop destruct, like if you do have a cover crop there. And when you think about 60 days of work for commercial fertilizer, yes, but when it comes to dried manures, composts, commercial fertilizer, applying stuff that's 46% nitrogen, right? If you do use urea, 20%, 32% nitrogen. With compost, dried manures, you're dealing with stuff that's 0.9%, 0.7%. Total
How much time
nitrogen
do you think
with-
you need for those materials?
I would say at least 3 months, 4 months. And the risk of leaching is, if you apply that over the wintertime, it's not going to break down into a leachable nitrogen anyway.
Right.
So I don't.
Does it make sense to add language about plant available in and something around like manures or composts? or keep it simple and just change the number of days. I mean, really, like that whole section, right, is I can't remember, Renee, what resource you took it out of. I think it was like an NRCS resource. But you can correct me if I'm wrong, but trying to make sure that like folks just aren't putting it on too early, where particularly like the synthetic ends that have more ability to leach in, an early rain event or whatever else, right? Like that's what we're kind of trying to control around. That's the purpose. So totally recognize manures, composts, right? They take time to actually bioconvert, and aren't available to leach.
Yeah, and then even the liquid nitrogen, TKN. I mean, EPA did some work that showed us, under like, and there's liquid TKN, under 43 degrees. I mean, it's just going to sit there. So I think having this section, if you did 60 days, apply to synthetic fertilizers, but say it doesn't apply to organic nitrogen or non-synthetic fertilizers.
Okay.
Jeff?
Yeah, I was just going to echo what Greg was saying. I think there just needs to be an ability to apply like these compost and manures beyond that 60 days. And then the other part with the cover crop was, I think there's a section that requires you to grow a cover crop at some point if you're not in compliance. Just for your guys' information, to grow a cover crop in that area is $30 to $50 an acre. So you're looking at $3,000 to $5,000 an acre, or $3,000 to $5,000 a pivot to do that. So again, just fiscal impact. So if you're not flexible with the like manures and compost, the way to get around that to apply in the fall, which everyone's going to have to do, is to plant a cover crop. So you're adding $5,000 an acre, $5,000 a pivot to be able to do that, just to apply compost when it's feasible.
Me too.
So, yep.
Thanks, Jeff. Kevin?
Yeah, Nick had pointed something out to me, and hopefully I stated it right. But for Greg's comment about the application of manure or compost, I think what he was trying to say is that at the beginning of that, where it says except as otherwise required by law, so does that mean that the manure and compost can be applied for the organic certifications because there is requirements there, and so that might resolve the issue related to manure and compost. Nick might have something more to add to that, but that's what I think he was trying to say to me.
Thanks, Kevin. Jeff?
Yeah, my comment to that is a lot of compost goes down on fields that aren't organic. And so they would be very limited. So I don't think that addresses all the issue, based on Kevin's comment.
Thanks. We have about 11 minutes left in today's meeting. And I know, Renee, you had wanted to get through those rules and maybe go back to the questions that Danny had. I don't know if this might be a good time to do that.
Well, before we do that, I just want to make sure I've heard a lot of great information about fiscal impact, but I want to make sure that we cover any other comments regarding fiscal impacts that you folks may have thought about since the last RAC meeting. I'd like to talk about those now before we go back to section 12. So
Go ahead, Greg.
So I'll be preparing more fiscal impact comments later. I don't have them all today, but just to echo a little bit of what Jeff was saying with some of the specialized tooling that'd be required for, like, say, wheat, for instance, not be able to apply water and have them do soil samples. I mean, on a crop that, if you look at today's market, is already losing money. So to add insult to injury, corn loses money right now. Wheat loses money. I mean, we don't control the markets. We don't get to go out and do the crop surveys, and USDA tells us essentially that they affect the markets, whether it's wheat corn or what have you. We're price takers. And so having to add specialized equipment to go down to 4 feet, 5 feet, fallen wheat fields, especially nut, or even fields that aren't harvested, especially fields that we have not been able to apply water to get those samples. Like Jeff said, that's a $40,000 machine. And so depending on how many acres you got, that can be a pretty big hit per acre.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. I want to encourage folks that as you think about that more, don't hesitate to email us that information. This isn't the last time that we want to hear from you about fiscal impact pieces.
Great. Okay, well, we have a few minutes, so I'll try to address some of your questions, Danny, on section 12. So this is methods for evaluating your annual nitrogen plan. Subsection 1 now says a landowner has met or followed an annual nitrogen plan if for each field application of fertilizer at an agronomic application rate has resulted in achieving each crop's estimated yield, but post-harvest soil nitrate levels are low or decreasing and nitrate leaching is minimized or prevented. So this is what we're trying to achieve with the annual nitrogen plan. Yes.
Do we have
Go ahead.
a baseline of, for instance, in DEQ permit, there's a target soil nitrogen in the capital permits is target soil nitrogen. We're saying low,
Yes.
which is kind of but everybody's got a different definition of low, or some,
Right.
folks may.
Right.
It's kind of
Yeah.
ambiguous, which I like in some ways, but at the same time, it goes back to the trend as well. It might actually take care of some of the problems with having a trend over 5 years, especially on an annual cropping system, because we will see a difference. I guarantee you, from crops to year, there is a difference in what's left over in the soil. Has there been thoughts of having kind of a target range that you stay within, so that
Absolutely.
even if you
Yeah.
have a slight trend up? I mean, what if I go from 5 pounds to 7, right? That's a trend up, or 5 to 15, or 15 to 20. That's a lot different trend than if somebody goes from 100 to 150, right? But they're both upward
Mhm.
trends. So has there been
Mhm.
thoughts of having,
Yes.
so I'd
I-
love to hear
I'll
those
tell you,
thoughts.
I think about it so much you would just be astonished. Like, ask my husband. I think about this all the time. And the problem we're having is that we would love to have a chart of numbers that give you a range, like a quantitative chart of nitrate levels in the soil, so you have something to gauge your performance against. And originally we thought about adopting some numbers that came out of the Willamette Valley, but then there was a lot of resistance to using numbers that were developed for those different soil and precipitation regimes. There was so much resistance that we backed off of that table that had numbers in it. And the problem is we just don't have anything to replace that, because we don't have numbers for the LUBGWMA, for the soils in the LUBGWMA. So we've got this giant data gap that we're struggling with. So yeah, you're right. It's a problem.
Right. And we also didn't want to create, this is an evaluation section for the grower. This is not a compliance point. This section, we didn't want also using a number that wasn't based in the region to set some type of a perceived compliance point that wasn't intended. And I get, like, low and decreasing, it's super squishy, but to Renee's point, we're trying to navigate. We don't actually have data to say, well, it should be, falling into this range. And so we could just set it. So we thought this was a better way to go without having the data to, like, back up why we chose 35 ppm, for example, or something like that.
So what we've tried to do is create the annual nitrogen plan is kind of like it's like a partial nitrogen budget, you know, nitrogen in, nitrogen out, figure out kind of what's left over and try to manage that and decrease what's left over. So this evaluation piece kind of lays out 3 methodologies for exercising a partial nitrogen budget. And the first methodology is just the straight total nitrogen applied minus total nitrogen removed. And so a grower using this methodology would have to measure all of the nitrogen input and then measure all of the nitrogen taken off of the field, either as the crop or the crop residue, everything. And we like this methodology, but again, what we're running into is that the grower would have to have crop specific nitrogen coefficients for their crop. So they would have to know what the nitrogen content is for the crop and the residue. And here again, we run into a big data gap, but we understand that this is a preferred methodology and it's a really good methodology for evaluating potential impacts on groundwater. So we wanted to get it in the rule with the hope that folks can start developing or finding applicable specific nitrogen coefficients that would work so that they could implement this first methodology. The second methodology is just determining post-harvest soil nitrate levels. This methodology is well supported in the literature. We understand it's not perfect, and we understand that maybe it's not even a favored methodology at this point. However, a review of the literature indicates that it is used quite frequently as a way to figure out how much post-harvest soil nitrates are remaining, especially within the crop rooting zone. So the point is that you don't want nitrate to be leaching beyond the crop root zone. You just want to manage your nitrogen enough so that you're getting your estimated yield and you're not leaching below the crop root zone. This other methodology is just focusing on whether or not you met your estimated crop yield, with the thought being that if you did, you probably used up all of the nitrate or the nitrogen that you applied, and that there shouldn't be any remaining, or there should be low levels remaining at the crop root zone. So the whole thrust of this evaluation technique is how to gauge the effectiveness of your partial nitrogen budget. And measure nitrogen use efficiency. And the other piece of it is whether or not you're leaching beyond the crop root zone. So you have to really pay attention to your irrigation methods to make sure that you're not applying more water beyond the soil's field capacity.
Danny, I know you had your hand up there for a second. Did you want to jump in? I know we're at time, but we can also pick this up at the next meeting too.
Yeah, I wanted to be respectful of time. Sorry, yeah, I wanted to be respectful of time. So I can hold this for now, and we can submit some written thoughts too.
Okay, yeah, or we can connect offline. That's fine. Before we jump, just wanted to, I'm going to put this in the chat really quick. We will be presenting to the Board of Ag on September 5th. Is that right?
Yes.
Yes, September 5th at 10 a.m. On the rules, giving them an overview of where we're at, kind of like the main thrust of the rules and what they're intended to do. So I imagine we will get some good engagement from those folks. I know Eric certainly will ask us plenty of questions since he's been in all these discussions as well. So look forward to that, and then we'll have a follow-up final RAC meeting afterwards, and we can kind of go through changes, any of the other points, kind of like we did today, jumping around all over to talk through different sections and doing the fiscal analysis kind of comments as well. So again, send anything in that you have for us in written is great. We can connect, and then we can also connect at the next RAC meeting, which we will get you dates shortly for. So thanks, everyone. Really appreciate your time today.
And real quick, if you do want to submit public comments during the Board of Ag meeting, they ask that you email them I think by the 25th. And so just that information is on that agenda that Isaac put there, and I'll also put that in our section on the rulemaking page, but just wanted to clarify you can be there in person or virtually. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank you.